This past week, the Trump team made a move so nakedly transparent and corrupt, it actually would have been more surprising if they didn't try it. His attorney submitted a filing pushing for the trial in the federal classified documents case to be delayed until some indeterminate point in the future, certainly after the 2024 election. Jack Smith has now responded to the delay request, excoriating the Trump team for their misguided efforts. Jack Smith would ultimately issue 6 separate reasons why the delay should be not granted, but before he did any of that, he offered what I think is reason enough unto itself. The filing reads, "Any discussion of setting a trial date must begin with the Speedy Trial Act of 1974. The very first sentence of the act forecloses defendant's proposal here. In any case involving a defendant charged with an offense, the appropriate judicial officer, at the earliest practicable time, shall, after consultation with the counsel for the defendant and the attorney for the government, set the case for trial on a day certain so as to assure a speedy trial. The defendants chide the government for seeking an expedited trial, but in doing so they have it exactly backward. A speedy trial is the foundational requirement of the Constitution and the United States Code, not a government preference that must be justified." So that's it. That right there is justification enough alone not to grant this delay, because the law literally demands a speedy trial, meaning that the Trump team's request to expressly not schedule a trial flies in the face of the law, which, in retrospect, is pretty fitting for Donald Trump. Jack Smith would go on to rebuke in detail all of the flimsy excuses put forward by Trump's lawyers, like, for example, the suggestion the Presidential Records Act mandates dismissal of the indictment, which the DOJ wrote, "borders on frivolous." And look, I could go on, but the point here is clear. Jack Smith and the DOJ offered a masterclass in rebuking what is effectively baseless disinformation. Now, of course, it's certainly worth noting that the reason that the Trump team wants to delay this trial is clear. Their hope is that Trump wins the 2024 election and then uses the levers of government to absolve himself of any and all accountability. Maybe he pardons himself, maybe the 25th Amendment is invoked and the vice president takes over and pardons Trump for him, maybe Trump relies on a corrupt attorney general to scuttle the DOJ's own case against him. Whatever avenue he takes, the overarching strategy is clear. The point of waiting until after the election isn't to get a fair trial, it is to kill the trial. And so now the question becomes, will the judge presiding over this case, Judge Aileen Cannon, rule in Trump's favor or not? We should expect an answer as soon as July 18th, which will be the next pretrial hearing, at which point she can either accept the DOJ's proposed date of December 11th, 2023, she can expect the Trump team's request of leaving the trial date open-ended, or she can split the baby, so to speak, and possibly give the Trump team a few extra months, but not delay until after the 2024 election. And while I have no clue how she'll rule, I would just say up front that if she did opt to grant Trump and his team the request that they're seeking, it would be the single most blatant sign of corruption that you could possibly conjure up from this case. It would dwarf the already obvious interference that she ran on Trump's behalf when she tried to sabotage the DOJ's efforts to investigate Trump for the very documents at question in this case by appointing a special master to review what the FBI seized at Mar-a-Lago. She had claimed then that Trump deserves special treatment because, quote, as a function of plaintiff's former position as President of the United States, the stigma associated with the subject seizure is in a league of its own, which is Trump lackey speak for Donald Trump is above the law. And keep in mind, that move was so legally tenuous that the conservative U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit rebuked her, writing, "The law is clear. We cannot write a rule that allows any subject of a search warrant to block government investigations after the execution of that warrant. Nor can we write a rule that allows only former presidents to do so." And yet, even still, that action by Judge Cannon would pale in comparison to the prospect of her actually granting this request by the Trump team to delay the trial until after the 2024 election. With that said, keep in mind, we are still in the pretrial period. If Judge Cannon did pull a stunt like that, the DOJ still has the opportunity to request that she recuse herself from this case. And if she refused, the Justice Department would then have the opportunity to seek her removal and replacement from the case by appealing to the same appeals court that had already rebuked her for her initial interference. And so given the fact that she's already skating on thin ice and that any efforts to so blatantly help the Trump team may very well signal the end of her presiding over this case, one would think that she would exercise just a little bit of discretion. Is that a guarantee that she will? Not at all. But her future in this case and her reputation on the bench certainly does hinge on her next moves here. With that said, even if Trump doesn't get the postponement that he's seeking, that doesn't mean that his attorneys won't still try to delay this thing with a raft of pretrial motions for expressly that purpose. It's almost certain that if Cannon doesn't doesn't grant the Trump team their indeterminate delay, they're certain to try to introduce motion after motion to try to get their delay through other means. Remember, the fish rots from the head. So in the same way that Trump will do anything he can to evade accountability, his legal team is certain to help him do whatever he can to evade accountability. And of course, let's not forget why the Trump team is so desperate to avoid this case. Because Trump has no defense. Because the fact is that we know Trump stole classified documents, that he refused to return them when he was asked, that he defied subpoenas from the National Archives, that he has lawyer issue a false attestation claiming that all of the documents had been returned when they hadn't, that the FBI eventually executed a search warrant that turned up everything he pretended not to have, and that he was even caught on tape admitting to having classified documents.
Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Look at that.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. You attack, and
Hillary would print that out all the time, you know.
she'd send it. No, she'd send it to Anthony Weiner,
Yeah.
the pervert.
Please print.
By the way, isn't that incredible? Though?
Yeah.
I was just saying because we were talking about it, and you know, he said he wanted to attack Iran and what. These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know, we'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out a
See, as president, I could have declassified
Yeah.
it. Now I can't, you know, but this is
Yeah,
classified.
now we have a problem.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's so cool. I mean, it's so, we here and I have, and you probably almost didn't believe me, but now you believe me.
No, I believe
It's
you.
incredible, right?
No, they,
Hey, bring
they never
some
had a
Cokes in,
4-hit one.
please.
So not for nothing, if I was Donald Trump, I'd probably do everything I could too to delay this trial, because once it starts, it is highly unlikely he'll figure out a way to avoid conviction. With that said, his prospects in other cases are just as grim. Remember, aside from this federal indictment for stealing classified documents, he's also been indicted in the Manhattan DA case for his illegal hush money payouts to Stormy Daniels, among a number of other charges. He's awaiting indictment in Fulton County, Georgia, for pressuring Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 non-existent votes. He's awaiting another indictment by the Justice Department for charges related to his efforts to steal the 2020 election and the events surrounding January 6th. He's awaiting indictment in New York's Attorney General Tish James's $250 million civil suit against him, his kids, and his business for fraud. And he's contending with yet another defamation lawsuit from E. Jean Carroll, which was recently amended to include more disparaging comments that Trump made during a CNN town hall. So if you're wondering why he's so desperate to make this Hail Mary play of winning the election and then wiping his own slate clean, it's because otherwise he may very well spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.